This conference will now be recorded.
Well, thank you all for joining me on today, September the 5th in 2022, which is Labor Day, which of course we have a little bit of a light crowd because most people are out having fun and enjoying Labor Day, but we're still going to have our meeting. Um, as I always say, really quickly, we have three parts to the meeting. First part is everybody take a minute or two to introduce themselves. And Amanda, if you want to take a little bit longer, because I know you're representing a special program and this is your first time. So we'll let Bob and Rhoda go first, and then you can go and take a little bit longer. Tell us about the activity you have going on. Um, and then after that, we'll open it up for general conversation. Hopefully, the introductions trigger some questions. Also, we can talk a little bit about business in general, the economy in general, certain no shortage of topics. And if we end a little bit earlier than usual today, that is perfectly fine too. So that's our agenda. I'll keep my part brief. So, Rhoda, ladies first, and I know you've been to, gosh, honestly, almost every single
Really
one this year.
how
So,
woke I am.
why don't you kick
I'm
us
going to let
off?
Bob go first. Bob, the gentleman first.
Okay, all right. So, well, my name's Bob Molony. I'm in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia, and I'm a consultant. My business is expense reduction analyst, and I work with business leaders to help them execute their plans, help them to do that by finding opportunities to reduce their operating expenses in ways they didn't consider possible. Everything that I do is self-funding, and all of the savings convert directly to cash flow. I'm able to provide expertise in over 40 different cost categories, and the savings are typically in double digits. Again, Bob Molony with Expense Reduction Analysts.
Perfect. Rhoda, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Rhoda Israelov in Indianapolis, Indiana, and my business is called Say It For You because that's what my team and I do. We are ghostwriters that focus on the wordsmithing piece of the marketing puzzle, and we write blogs and web content to show web visitors that you are in the now and in the know. And so I finally landed a type of client that I was looking for a long time, which is a retirement community. So we now have a retirement community. So my next target, if you will, is a business attorney. So if you know a business attorney, tell them don't neglect your blog because you don't want your visitors coming on and seeing content that was written 6 months ago, and you want to show them that you know what's going on right now. So tell them that we will say it for you.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And Amanda, welcome. And again, introduce yourself personally, professionally. Tell us about the activity that you're doing. And also, by the way, I always encourage people to put their contact information in the chat because later tonight I'll share a copy of the recording on YouTube and I'll share the contact information that you place in the chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me today. My name is Amanda Farley. I'm the area director for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the West Virginia chapter. And we're having our Out of the Darkness walks to fight suicide all around, really around the whole country right now. But we're specifically working on our West Virginia event. And our loss coordinator in the Northern Panhandle had gotten in touch with Sal as far as getting involved with this event, and he invited us to be on this call too. So the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, we are a volunteer-driven organization. We have suicide prevention education. We have loss and healing support for those who have lost somebody to suicide, and then we also conduct research for better ways to understand suicide and help to prevent. So the events that we have coming up right now are Out of the Darkness walks to fight suicide. I know some of you are out of West Virginia, but we definitely encourage you to look for them in your area. They're going to be happening. Start our first one on Saturday. So if you're interested in getting involved, We are a nonprofit organization, and we rely on funding from businesses, from people that participate in our Out of the Darkness Walks are our largest fundraiser. And most people participate in honor of somebody that they've lost or because they struggle personally themselves. And the walks themselves are just a wonderful way for people to connect and understand that they're not alone in their grief journey or in their mental health journey. Our goal is to make mental health as important and as treated as we do our physical health, and stop the stigma of suicide and realize that people are not dying by suicide, they're dying from mental health, and we have to do a better job. We also do a lot of advocacy work. So, West Virginia, our statistics will say that 87% of West Virginians, so most of our West Virginians, do not even have access to mental health care as stated by the federal guidelines. So, we definitely have a lot of work to do. It's the number 2 cause of death in West Virginia in ages 12 to 34. And that's the number that we're seeing to grow is in our youth. So we definitely have a lot of work to do. And that's what we do. We're in the school systems. We do suicide prevention education really to we have different programs for different age groups and different organizations. We have a business model program too that can be presented virtually. It's called Talk Saves Lives, and it's for the workplace. So if you have an organization that is looking for just a mental health communication within their own business, that's something that we can also bring to businesses, and this is what we fundraise for. So we do these things at no charge to companies. So we want to make sure there are as many people that are suicide aware, can understand and recognize the signs of suicide, and know what the next steps are to help somebody that they might be worried about that is struggling. Some of the really cool things that's just happening right now is, as part of the legislation we worked on this in the past really 2 years, is the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The big 1-800 number is now, as of about 4 weeks ago, 988. So it's just like 911. It is now 988. So it's a much easier number for people to get. I actually met a person when we were doing a resource tabling event in Southern West Virginia who had the 1-800 number tattooed on his arm. And it just made me so sad to think that it was, and I'm so glad that he has that number and he's teaching college, because there's statistically that number, 97% of people that call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, their issues can be de-escalated within that phone call to keep that person safe at that moment. But just to think about that person who, is in such distress to have to look and Google and try to even remember this long 1-800 number, and now they're able to call 988. So 2 years ago was when we were working on the legislation to get that passed. This past year, we were working on making sure it was getting funded within our state. West Virginia, thankfully, was one of the few states that was able to fund this number within some legislation this year. So very proud of the work that we did with that, and hopefully a lot more people that are needing help are able to reach out and get help more quickly, and having that number more accessible. So I rambled on a lot. So, but we do a lot of work here. I'm the only paid employee that we have in the whole state of West Virginia. Everything else we do is by volunteers. We have volunteers that are trained in their suicide prevention education, that run our walk events. We have other fundraising events throughout the year. We have grief support groups that we do our advocacy work. All this is done by volunteers because it's a passion of theirs, and it means something to them.
Fantastic. Rhoda, did you have a question or a comment?
I wanted just to say that this is such a timely time to meet you, because the headlines are that the CEO of Bed Bath & Beyond just committed suicide.
Yeah, I read that, and actually I didn't read it. My husband said that the article said that he fell, and that's kind of that's something else with suicide, that a lot of it can be misrepresented or underreported because of things like that. But when suicide especially becomes within the public eye, we've seen it a lot with Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade and other celebrities. It really you worry about a lot of contagion that can happen from that, but it also puts it to light to say these are real people that have real struggles. There's not one cause of suicide. It can be many different factors, and usually it is many different factors, but maybe there is one thing that kind of pushed them over to think that this is their only way out. But I did hear about that. Was it yesterday or just this past weekend in general, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask a question. Does the AFSP, did they do anything associated with the National Alliance on Mental Illness?
So, I mean, we do partner with a lot of other organizations. We work a lot with our veterans, with our LGBTQ communities, with recovery, addiction and recovery, and all these things are really related. Not necessarily the LGBTQ, but it's a high-risk community. Same with veterans, it's a high-risk community for suicide prevention. So we do partner with a lot of even other suicide prevention organizations because we have to do this work together. So in West Virginia we don't, but there may be other chapters that are working specifically with them.
Well, and let me tell you guys, suicide is one of those things that you think, oh, it'll never happen to anybody I know. It's maybe limited to the high risk population or people with certain characteristics. I can tell you from a personal experience, which was very surprising to me. Let's put it that way. One of my very first bosses when I started working at Hewlett Packard committed suicide. This was after, he moved to another position. But it was very impacting to me for a couple of reasons. Number one was this is a person that I knew very well because he was my direct boss and we would work together on all kinds of different projects at work every day for a couple of years. So professionally I knew him very well. And two, is he had the perfect career, the perfect job at the perfect company, a beautiful family. I mean, everything that you could see from the outside, you would say, "Oh my God, this guy's got it together. He's going places." And sure enough, a couple of years later, he committed suicide. So, the even the people that you think are really having it all together could could be victims of this. And again, that was a surprising to me and a person that I knew directly. And I'm sure, by the way, I don't know, Amanda, if you have any statistics on this, but I'm sure there's a very large percentage of people that have been impacted with this in a personal way. I wouldn't be surprised about that.
I don't know specific statistics of people that have been impacted from suicide because it's so vast. You don't know. I mean, this was someone that was not directly related to you, but had an impact for in your life. As you're just a connection that you had with that person. And I thank you for sharing that story with us too. And we do a lot of outreach. We do tabling events where we have resources and just I think being at a fair or a concert and seeing the word suicide out there is really important for people to hear, because the program that we have, Talk Saves Lives, is because we know people are able to talk about how they feel and feel comfortable saying, listen, I'm not okay, then we can get that person help. It's when you don't talk about it and you're holding it in and you don't seek that help that people get into their dark suicidal thoughts and suicide ideation and could end up ending their life. And we don't use the word committed suicide just basically because of a negative connotation of the word committed. When you think of committed, it's a crime, or it's it has a negative connotation. So that's something that we're looking at changing and trying to change that language to. We would say died by suicide, killed themselves, ended their life. Anything with just not using the word committed to. And we also do, we work with AFSP as a national organization, works a lot with all of the movie companies and YouTube, Netflix, and places that are putting on, making movies that include suicide to make sure that they're having safe messaging and that there's information from people that are experts that when you're producing a movie or something that includes that to make sure that it is safe. And we also work with our local news and media outlets to make sure that we're reporting on suicide safely. We never talk about the means of suicide, how they died, and we try to use words like died by suicide and eliminate that committed, to take that criminal kind of connotation out of it, because it really is they died from a mental health disease.
Okay. Let me ask you a quick question. I mean, I know from reading in the news that there's a statistical connection between sort of the state of the economy, meaning recession, unemployment, things like that, and drug use, and alcohol too. I'm assuming but you tell me if I'm wrong, that there's also a connection between, again, the same thing, recession, unemployment, whatever, with suicides. And right now we're at a strange place and time economically where some people are saying, oh my God, inflation's through the roof. Even though unemployment is low, we may be ready, getting ready to go into some recession and whatnot. So do you expect that there will be, if we go into a recession or bad economic times, do you expect, frankly, to be a higher incidence of suicides and attempts? And are you, from an organizational perspective, preparing for that in any particular way and trying to take any particular steps to be ready?
And that's hard. It's really hard to say what impact it's going to have on people's mental health. Finances is something that, without properly treated, mental health conditions, or, without even just communicating your feelings, things like losing your finances or have, change in some kind of lifestyle can trigger people to take their lives. So that's happened in the past as well, but it's really difficult to say what that impact is. AFSP in general is really, trying to, and especially with our walks and the things that we're doing, is just getting that messaging out, suicide, mental health, and just making those words normal part of our conversation. And so people do feel comfortable talking about their mental health, even if, theirs is triggered by a financial struggle or something of that sort. We just went through a whole pandemic and nobody knew what the impact was going to be on the human life of being in this pandemic for a year, 2 years, however long we're still in it. Who knows how long you want to say it is. And there have been a lot of, there's been a lot of changes in that. Actually, the suicide rate through the pandemic years has decreased. But that's overall, in certain populations, it's increased. So, looking at it in a deeper dive, there are certain populations that the rate of suicide is increasing. So, we do look at that closely. One of them is the African American population. We've developed a lot of programs geared specifically for the Black population too, and one of the new ones that's just out is called Soul Shop, and it is a program that's designed for clergy and faith leaders, the faith-based program to educate faith-based leaders in the Black churches to be able to know how to talk to someone about suicide, understanding the risks, and because we know a lot of people that are that have a strong faith may go to their pastors and their faith-based leaders for help if they're feeling a certain way. This program has been around for a while, but to look at it specifically in the Black community has been really important too. So that's a lot of what our money goes to, is developing these programs that are evidence-based. And we have programs for even elementary school. We've got a read aloud that we've partnered with another organization to do a book that talks about mental health. And so even as young as elementary school, being able to understand your feelings and when you and identifying a trusted person to be able to talk to, and saying how important it is to talk about your feelings. And so we're doing this through all ages. That's the thing about suicide. There's no population that's immune to it. I think Sal said that too. It's really, you don't know who it's affecting because it's everybody. It's something that affects everybody.
Well, I watch CBS Sunday Morning religiously, and yesterday there was a segment on how mental health issues have affected kids, and partially due to the pandemic, and there was an 8-year-old boy that was sharing his experience on, and it was just amazing, and he I mean he really did a great job, and he had been treated. He'd been treated for his mental health because he was having suicidal thoughts, and that from what I understand, the challenge is sometimes being able to find a counselor that's available to complete the training, or the not the training but the counseling.
The counseling, yeah, that's what I said. Our West Virginia statistics will say 87% of West Virginians don't have access to mental health, as according to what the federal guidelines would say we should have access to. That's almost the entire population. So we'll have a really rural community, and it's important for people to have access. It's one, and I have a lot of faith in that generation, the next generation that's coming out. I feel like my children are in high school right now. I feel like they're talking about their mental health a lot more, and normalizing that conversation a lot more with this generation coming up. But yeah, it is. It's definitely something that just we just need to normalize it across the board.
Yep. Rhoda, did you have anything or?
No, just very, very interesting. So is there an organization parallel to yours here in Indiana?
There is. I actually know their executive director very well. She's part of our division. Her name's Kelsey Stewart, and I will be happy to connect you guys together. Kelsey Aaron. Sorry, she got married a few months ago. So I'll be happy to connect.
I gave you my information, so go ahead and I'll invite her to be a speaker, at my network group.
Perfect. Yeah, she's wonderful. You'll love meeting with her too, and she can talk about everything that's happening in your state specifically. So it's a really amazing organization that is just really globally. We have an event coming up in it's always the Saturday before Thanksgiving in November. It's the International Survivor of Suicide Loss Day, and this is actually happening worldwide, where we have a workshop. We try to have them in all of 7 of our in West Virginia. We have 7 of our walk areas. We'll have a workshop, and we invite people to come that have experienced with suicide loss. And we're getting ready to get into the holiday times. We know this is difficult, so there is AFSP puts on produces a video, and usually tracks a family and their grief journey, and it's usually about 20 minutes long, and then there's discussion points from that, and a healing activity that we do. In a way, there's a memorial table, and just a way for people to connect with other loss survivors, and really prepare their hearts and minds as they go into the holiday season too. So that's something to look for as well in your areas. Each state will have an International Survivor of Suicide Loss Day, if you know of families that might be something beneficial to them.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind too, and I'm not a doctor, but I've seen this, is sometimes the medication for a mental health issue like depression or schizophrenia or whatever, something else, a lot of times it tells you that it may cause problems with suicidal thoughts or suicide attempts or things like that. So it's kind of a shame and a double-edged sword that at what you're giving some medication to try to help with a problem, but at the same time you're creating a different problem. So I guess it's the best we can do.
Yeah, and I think most of the medications that people are taking, I definitely think we need to normalize people taking medication for their mental health too, is beneficial to their mental health. I know there are some some medications that people take that can have an adverse effect. But I think if you're working with someone, a professional, then it can really be a life changer.
What correlation have they found or proven between bullying and suicide in young people?
It's always a good point to bring up, and we know that suicide is a complex health issue, and it is not necessarily there's not usually one specific thing that makes someone in their life, and it can be a combination of things, and that absolutely, especially with a growing mind and an adolescent mind, and not knowing how to really process their emotions, can really have an effect on that. But specifically to say, is it just bullying that can cause suicide? It's really difficult to say that because it's such a complex issue, and children that die by suicide that have been bullied may have had underlying mental health conditions that they just don't know about, and maybe the bullying was the culmination of what was happening to make them in their lives. That's especially with adolescents, and they're such a young, impressionable group, and their brain development is still happening. So that's why we have one of my favorite programs for youth. It's really a middle high school group. It's called Seize the Awkward, and it's in conjunction with the Ad Council. There are the videos, and they're done by influencers and people that they might know. I'm going to say Billie Eilish is one that you might have heard, and she'll talk about her mental health and how she's dealing with it, and then we can have a discussion with that group too. But to be able to see that these are people that they look up to. A lot of them are YouTubers and stuff that I don't know, but my kid's oh, there's Markiplier, I don't know who it is, but but they're influencers, and so that's a great program. And I love the name Seize the Awkward, because it is an awkward conversation, and a lot of times you have people that you may be worried about somebody, and maybe your friends even come to you that says, I'm thinking about ending my life or whatever, and they just don't understand that you need to find that trusted adult and bring taking this seriously, and that's not something that that an adolescent can really handle all of that, but being able to go to a friend if you're worried about them and say, hey, I've been noticing this behavior in you, and I'm worried. Are you okay? Having that conversation, having that awkward conversation with your friends is important, and that's part of what that program is. And I love the Seize the Awkward name to it too, because it's what it is.
Oh, Amanda, let me ask you this, because Rhoda asked about bullying. What about video games? How big of a role are they playing? I every once in a while I hear there's some issues, and so from your perspective, sort of a little bit more of directly in touch with this, and maybe outside the media hype. How much of an issue are video games?
And I honestly don't know. I don't know the correlation or what the statistics are, or what kind of effect gaming has had. I do know that we have, as an organization, got involved with a lot of more in the gaming community, because there is a gaming community that cares about each other, and then depression can be part of that as well. And some of it is, especially in West Virginia, I can speak that we've been invited as an organization into the gaming community as a need. So, we're doing a gaming convention in Charleston where they're doing a fundraiser for AFSP. We'll be setting up, they're doing a panel discussion that's talking about gaming and depression. And so, it definitely is a other group to look at, but the same thing about gamers, that's not their whole life. They have jobs and families and other things too. It can't really just be specifically gaming.
Okay. All right, Bob, Rhoda, anything else with Amanda?
This has been really insightful.
Yeah. Well, please get in touch with me with the contact, the local contact.
Yeah, I absolutely will. I will share your contact information with Kelsey and see you guys can get together. I know she would be interested in meeting with you guys.
Perfect. All right. Well, anything else before we disband? Any business issues or business related issues that everybody, anybody wants to talk about. I mentioned some in my email. I mentioned about inflation, of course, and the labor shortage, and again, some people are saying that maybe we'll have a recession. I think the jury's out on that. But anything that is on your mind that's got you worried that you want to talk about?
Um, Bob, take a look at my latest email and respond to it, please.
All right, I will. I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't say that I'm particularly worried, but inflation is definitely one of the key topics
Yeah,
that applies to my business, and it's almost directly correlating to folks being able to uh, retain and hire new staff, for that matter.
definitely. I think that's such a problem everywhere and in every industry is hiring people who are feel that they're being paid enough to make it worthwhile to be consistent about coming to work.
Yep. Oh, I can tell you guys, and this is just one data point. It's very unscientific, but it still kind of called my attention. I don't live near Five Guys, so the other day I was on a business trip and I went by the Five Guys. So I said, okay, fine, I'm going to take the opportunity to stop here. I went in. I literally ordered two hot dogs with ketchup and mustard, nothing else, and a chocolate shake. Matter of fact, we'll play a little game. What do you think? Two hot dogs and a chocolate shake at Five Guys. How much do you think I paid for that?
$25.
30.
Boy, Rhoda's close. $20. It was like 19 something, and I'm sitting like, wow, $20. I mean, maybe it's me getting old, remembering stuff from years ago that is no longer relevant. But I'm sitting here like two hot dogs and a shake, $20. I said,
That's
We
a
if
just
I
lot.
got
I
Indiana,
don't know
we
what is.
just got notified that Indiana Energy is now our bill is going up 12.5% starting this next month. 12.5%, that's a big deal for every month for your heating and air.
Well, I think something that stands out to me, not so much in terms of the cost, but in the area where I live, within, I want to say probably within 3 miles, there are three urgent care facilities. None of them open on the weekend, and it, and
Right.
it's and it's all because of staffing. They can't staff them.
Yeah.
Now,
Um,
but let me ask you this question, and I'm a whatever a believer maybe in traditional economics. Could they open them if they were just willing to pay enough for people to stop doing something else and show up there for the weekend? The doctors, I mean, and the nurses.
Yeah, but I don't think they even have doctors. I think they're probably physicians assistants for the most part. But I would say, yeah, probably if they, if they would pay the freight, they'd be able to staff them. And maybe it's the opposite, Sal. Maybe it's because there are so many of them. If there was only one and they only had to staff one, maybe that would be the solution.
If you think about, so I always think about how does this affect like suicide, and if someone is in suicide crisis, sometimes they go to like an emergency department. And now if you don't have these other clinics that people can go to, now your emergency departments are full, and we've had instances locally where people have gone to their emergency department in a mental health crisis and been sent to the waiting room to sit for hours and hours and hours. And now they're just here thinking, well, this is my only chance, my only hope, and they're not even helping me either. And they walked out to the parking lot and killed themselves. And so, like, those things really affect everybody when you don't have enough care for people, and not only just mental health, but if those facilities aren't open, you're overrunning your emergency departments too, which are overstaffed and overworked, and you have people that are stressed out there to care for just basic health needs.
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I had
Well,
seen
not only that, if and luckily I don't have to go to urgent care or things like that too often, but I always think about them as these are the guys that should be open on the weekend. If they need to be closed, then maybe closed during the week, because during the week, maybe you have your regular doctor, you have the emergency room, you have other things, but when you really need the urgent care is typically on the weekend. So it's almost, to be honest with you, a little bit backwards to me. I try to put all my resources to be open on the weekend and maybe close some other days.
Yeah. Um, I need to check in Indianapolis whether those emergency ones are, are open on the weekends. I need to see that, but I think that the when you walk into any kind of medical facility, there's so much red tape and so much uh, insurance crapola that you have to go through before anybody asks you, "Are you okay?" You just wonder, even if they're open, whether you know what I mean. It's just
Yeah. Oh, I remember I went somewhere. I don't know if it was the emergency room or an urgent care or something, and I forget what I had. But what I remember very clearly is I show up at the desk, and before the lady even asked me, like, "Hey, what's wrong? What hurts? What's your problem?" First question out of her mouth is, "What is your insurance?" And I'm sitting here like, I don't mind. I'm expected to get asked this, but wouldn't you like at least ask me first, like, "Hey, what hurts? What's your problem? Why are you here?"
yeah, it's true.
Anyway, well,
But
listen, guys, we're getting very close here to 2:45, so I want to let everybody out. For one, because it's a holiday, so thank you all for joining me on a holiday. It's greatly appreciated. I know Bob needs to go to a family gathering, a family picnic, so that's always a lot of fun. Hopefully, he'll get some free hot dogs over there, and but anyway, I'll send the recording out tonight. I'll put the notes from the chat on there, and we'll do it again in exactly 2 weeks. So Amanda, you're welcome to come back in exactly 2 weeks when we have more of a normal crowd, and I'll see all of you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you again for joining
Thanks,
me.
Sal.
Happy
Thanks
Labor
so much
Day.
for having
Good
me.
to see you all.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.